Hey, welcome to our fifth episode. Fifth
Sixth.
episode. Sixth.
Sixth.
Did I put fifth on the?
No, you put six.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
Well,
Dawn's our sixth.
I'd have to get mad at our graphics guy if that's if that
Yep.
said the wrong thing.
Shout out to Kyle for doing the
Shout out to
graphics.
Kyle. So we have a really awesome guest, but first I have to introduce someone to the family. This is the new forensic intent mascot, Fern. Oh, she's being sleepy, so I probably don't need to interrupt her too much, but I wonder, you want to say something? No? Okay. All right, so she'll be in my lap if I'm a little squirmy. That means she's trying to get away. So our guest today is Dawn Bauer, and you guys may know her as Advocacy and Grace on the Twitter land, on the Twitter machine. And I'm going to pop her on here. I'd like her to be on here when we introduce her, because she's just like the coolest person ever, and I want her to hear us introduce her. So welcome to Dawn.
Hey, Dawn.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, everyone.
So I think one of the coolest things about this show is us being able to introduce people that we talk to on Twitter all the time, and we don't really know them, but they're some amazing people, and Dawn is one of them. So I want to introduce her to you. She is living in Georgia, from Georgia right now, but she works half of the month almost in Utah. She's the co-executive director for supportive transitional living program for neurodivergent young adults and young adults, right? Called New Perspectives, which is very cool. So she works with individuals on the autism spectrum, and we'll have her kind of explain a little bit more about that.
Mm-hmm.
She has worked in mental health for many years, trained in behavioral analysis. She has worked as a CASA, which she can explain a little bit more to us. That's a volunteer position in most states, I think. Probably is in yours too. She has owned her own businesses. She has worked in real estate. She has remodeled, renovated homes. I'm telling you, Renaissance lady. This can be like a TED talk of the Renaissance lady. Oh my goodness. She has children. She has grandchildren, and she is the coolest lady ever to talk to. Aww. We're gonna have so much fun today. Dawn has a story to tell about her life, and it really ties into the work she does. So I would like for Dawn, if you don't mind, to just have at it. We want to hear what your story is and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm kind of humbled listening to you. It's like, she's talking about me, and, and I don't really, and so, and of course, I don't see myself that way. A lot of people ask, when I was a single mom with 3 little ones in my 20s, they were like, how do you do it? And my first statement was, I didn't think about it. Like, those aren't the things you think of. You just do it. I didn't know I had a choice. Had I had a choice, I might have done things differently. But anyway, before I kind of go into the story, first, I just want to thank you guys, so much. And I get emotional. I'm sorry. I don't know where this is coming from, but just hearing you say that, having this opportunity to share, I have my professional life and now have worked in advocacy for many years, but it now has me working with the neurodivergent. But to really understand where I'm at today and really have an appreciation for that role myself, it really is the story of my life. Many people, go to school, high school, graduate, go to college, they choose their career. You ask them in kindergarten, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that's what they are at 25. My story has been anything but that. There's never been a straight path. And even though I did attend college, didn't graduate with a degree, had a completely different goal as a child, wanted to be a family lawyer, but I've ended up working in advocacy, and the volunteer work that I did, and then now the role that I have, plus my personal life, really kind of brought everything full circle. Mm-hmm. So I just thank you guys for having a platform that, even though we all connected through true crime, and I love my true crime podcast and all of that, I love that the intent here is to bring awareness to many different facets that I believe all then culminate in the true crime world. We see all of this play out to us and behind the screen. So I'm just so appreciative of a show that is really highlighting individuals and experts in various fields. We can all become more familiar. So when we are enjoying, I use enjoying loosely, I have all sorts of a range of emotions when I watch true crime, but yeah, it's cool to have this platform. So thank you guys. I don't, I've heard your story, but just to sit here and think about that again, I know that you both have your own journeys as well. So to kind of come together in this format and invite people in, I know that takes a lot of time and sacrifice on your part. So
Thank you for
we love
saying
it.
that. Thank you for
Yeah,
saying
thank
that.
you.
Yeah,
Dawn,
absolutely.
Dawn, could you just kind of cover, because I had to actually look the term up myself the other day, neurodivergency. Can you just kind of cover that before you start in with the rest, in case some of our viewers don't know what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the term that most of us are familiar with is neurotypical. There's always been this classification of a neurotypical person. And it's been kind of interesting that and this is my definition, right? I mean, I
I was
know
going to
that
say,
we
I
could
don't know
go
that
to the
everyone knows what neurotypical is either.
right.
So, yeah.
And so I'll go
Yeah.
through that as well. So in my world, in working with neurodivergent, we typically in a mental health world are looking at people that are neurotypical, but they're struggling with depression or alcoholism or, things that have been more rooted in contributors and things that they can work through and work on. In a neurotypical brain, you carry on conversations, your life skills are pretty adaptable. You can grow and learn.
Those are the worried well.
Oh,
We call
yeah,
therapy.
your processes, your thinking processes, your processing speed, you're taking in information, your working memory, all of those things are pretty average or above average, right? For a neurotypical person.
Mhm.
With neurodiversity, to me, it's a blanket. It's a term to me. And again, I said this is not. I don't know that you would go and find this on the internet. Don't Google it. You might not even want to quote me because there might be some experts that would say that's absolutely not neurodiversity. But for me, it really is a stepping in. It's an umbrella that we have placed. Most commonly, we think of autism. So autism started out, and there were autism. There was oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank to what everyone.
Asperger's was
Asperger's, thank
before.
you.
There
The
we go.
Yep.
Asperger's, and many people believe that or state that Asperger's and level 1 autism are the same thing, that they just replaced that term. We took the ASD level 1, 2, and 3. And in a lot of ways, it's true that level 1, ASD person is a higher functioning individual. And I can get into more of that as we talk about this. But you're looking at ADHD, autism, major depressive disorder, and typically what in the industry we call comorbidity. So it's not one diagnosis. It's a multitude of different things that many people will classify as a disability. One of the things I love about the owners of the program that I work for, they have their own personal journey with 4 biological children, 3 of which fall under the neurodivergent category, and their own personal journeys with neurodivergency. And so they really kind of coined this phrase of looking at it as that it's not a disability, but different abilities.
Mhm.
So you're really looking at some very complex behavior patterns, diagnoses, habits. And then, as they grow and get older, you're also looking at a lot of learned behaviors that we're
Mhm.
working to overcome. So neurodiversity, I start rambling. I apologize. You have to reel me back in.
No, you're good.
Yeah, neurodiversity is just really, I think, a way of identifying a group of individuals, and it's, we've got our neurotypical. And then when you say neurodiversity, more and more people are better. There's a distinguishment, but to me, it doesn't describe, it doesn't define,
Mhm.
And so I'm
what
just
that
going to
is.
interject real quick. So like in psychology, we have, sort of like what are developmental disorders in a way.
Mhm.
So neurodevelopmental disorders, and those
Exactly.
are autism, what we used to know as Asperger's, and then
Mhm.
ADHD, problems with what we call like executive functioning, which is the front part of your brain. It's
Exactly.
planning, organizing. Scott has a really well developed frontal lobe. Planning, organizing, problem solving, emotional control. A lot of those things happen up there, and so neurodivergent people tend to have some difficulty with that sort of thing. And so they may be very, very good at a particular task they've learned, but then applying that to other things can be really
Mhm.
difficult. And you may also, just like in layman's terms, see these people as sort of quirky or eccentric. Sometimes their social
Yeah.
skills might be a little wonky and you can't really put your
Mhm.
finger on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what I think about when I think of neurotypical versus neurodivergent.
Neurodivergent. Yeah, thank you, because you helped fill in the blanks. I gave you the
Sure.
layman's, even though I'm the
Yeah.
expert.
No,
I gave
that's
you the
helpful.
layman's, and you were able to fill in those more from a therapist or a psychological
Yeah.
standpoint to kind of
Yeah.
describe that. So
Yeah.
thank you for for
Sure.
filling in those blanks. I really do, and I want to share so much about the neurodiversity, and then the role that I do. But I'm really kind of wondering that would it be better for me just to kind of start at the beginning, so to speak, and go back and just share a little of my journey, and then I think we
Yeah.
land
Well,
back where we started, so to
I
speak.
think it's
So
Yeah.
important. I think what's really important is for people to understand how you became an advocate and why
Right.
why is your name Advocacy and Grace on Twitter and where because I feel like that's uh-oh. I think she just left
Well,
us.
yep, she did.
I did not kick her off this time. Okay, I might have kicked Jack Rice off, but I did not kick Dawn off. Hold on one second. We'll get her back.
Hang on, Dawn.
She's doing that just to mess with me. Hold on.
There she comes.
Where'd you
well,
go?
I don't know. All of a sudden, the thing said updating, and it just went away.
Boom. Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if you heard me. I was like, I didn't do it. I might have kicked Jack Rice off,
I
but I
didn't
didn't
hear
kick
anything. Like all of a sudden, just everything started spinning. It's like when someone, oh my gosh. I guess
Okay.
got our one technical error out of the way.
Yes.
The last thing I heard
Done.
you say is your story and advocacy and grace is my.
How does advocacy, how did that happen? Because that seems to be a big part of your heart and who you are is the advocacy piece of
Mhm.
it.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, you know, as I look back, I try to identify that. I think my first memory of truly looking at others through a different lens and through a place of compassion, seeing and recognizing the underdogs, feeling deep emotions, but not knowing how to articulate what to say, was probably about 6 years old. And so that's kind of my first memories. And it's really where I had um, the acknowledgement and actually had firsthand experience with living with what wasn't back then, but is now called neurodiversity. My brother, who was 14 months younger than me, was born with hydrocephalus. So he was a waterhead child. My mother was very young and unwed when she got pregnant with me, and then did get married and had my brother, who was 14 months younger, and then my sister 5 years later. And so it was probably at around 6 that I really started to recognize, that my brother had these differences, and I had this little baby sister, and so I think that I think I was probably very conditioned to compassion and just looking at others and seeing those differences. But it was really as I began to grow, there were a lot of things in my childhood. That's a completely different story, completely different podcast. We won't talk about that. But there was trauma. There was a lot of heartache. There was abuse. There was a lot of secrets in the family. And I was raised in a very small agricultural community. It's the Bible Belt, and the things that happened at home were so often in direct contrast to what occurred in church,
Right.
but you don't know that it's just your household or that it's just a few households. You just think that's the way life exists. In fairness, I was born in
Yes.
1970. So, the 70s, you didn't talk about a lot of the issues that we see today and hear about. So, so my brother had surgeries. He had 13 surgeries in his brief 16-year life. And I think with just going through that, seeing, his struggles, his surgeries, and just all that encompassed that, also seeing a single mom, take care of children and work in the 70s and 80s and, kind of carving her own way in the world as well. I think it was around probably about 12 to 13 years old, I started to really see this is very different, my story feels a little bit different. I started going to friends' houses, and it wasn't the same at their houses. It wasn't, and so there were just things that I began to start picking up on. I think that was also where within myself, I truly believe we're all kind of on that personal journey to self. And some have the straight path there, and some take winding roads, and some stop and pick up, and so it's, there's a lot of different paths that we all live. But it was probably in that about 13 to 16 that I really started to go, something's off, and even though I knew it and I felt it, but that was where my passion for going into family law, finding a way to kind of be the voice of the voiceless, and not even knowing that was a CASA tagline when I actually fast forward years later became a CASA. But it really was being able to speak up for those that couldn't speak for themselves. And so then at 17, unfortunately, my brother was killed in an automobile accident. So I'd spent my entire life preparing, that he, could die on the operating table when they go in to replace
Oh,
the shunt. And instead it was a car accident. It was very
God.
tragic, and it was a horrible ending. It was also a new beginning, in a lot of ways for me to embrace life without him.
Mhm.
My sister and I being 5 years apart, it really wasn't until probably in my 20s that we kind of reached a place in life that we were living, our lives were more parallel than they were when we were younger. There's just that age
Mhm.
difference. And so if I talk about my brother, it's not to diminish, my sister at all. It's just that age difference, and his story was a little different. So in fairness to the siblings, trying to be the good big sister here, I guess. So when he was killed, I had a lot of anger. And that really, that deep-seated anger, that rage, that, those stories
Mhm.
that he had never told. Graduated high school, ran off to college, met the guy that would become the father of my children and my ex-husband now, and really tried running from, but kept getting this pull back. There's something deeper. What is going on? And it was through having my own children that I began to see the parts of me that were still very wounded.
Mhm.
And then going through a divorce,
Mhm.
8 years into the marriage is when I really began to look at and go, you've got to really take a look at yourself. There's some patterns, there's some tendencies, but underneath was a lot of that rage and a lot of that pain that I had
Mhm.
carried with me and continued to carry with me because, I was kind of the perfectionist. If everything looks good on the outside, then we don't have to worry about what's going on the inside. There's
Mm.
a lot of false beliefs, but inside was just as I say now, a hot mess, of
Mhm.
emotions and various things. So it was in my 20s, late 20s, that I got a divorce. And that was when I really began to embrace more therapy. And my family, of course, therapy was never something that had been talked about. It wasn't, you didn't talk about, you didn't share what was going on. Remember, everything was a secret.
Right.
So really embracing therapeutic models was tough for me. So I found
Mm.
other ways, I found other avenues in order to kind of express that part of myself that I wasn't able to talk about. And that was through advocacy work. In 2000, I just really began to have this pull to do something to get back to the community. And I also wanted my children, I wanted my three sons to see, the importance of giving back and having something other than just your work life and your social life and your family life, but giving something back as well. I was
Mhm.
always really big on that. And I'm going to get a sip of water.
Sure.
Okay.
Allergies and talking fast, so I'm starting
All
to dry
good.
out here.
All good.
And so it was. I was actually in a little boutique one day. I still remember it to this day. And the director of CASA just happened to come in,
Pause for a
overheard her.
second.
Uh
Tell
huh.
us what CASA is in case
Oh,
people don't know
CASA.
what that is.
Yeah. CASA stands for, it's an acronym, Court Appointed Special Advocate. And basically, when a child is brought into care, so through the Department of Family and Children's Services, some places it's called CPS, through abuse or neglect, the Department of Family and Children's Service represents, so the state, whichever state you're living in, represents the child, and then the parents, if there's, both mom and dad or whatever the situation may be, and sometimes it's even foster parents. They have their own attorneys, and then you have the judge. And so what they decided was there needed to be someone for the child, but not a paid position. There was no one profiting from spending time with the child. And other than the judge, it's the one party in the system that has equal access to everything. So as a CASA, I could go in and talk to mom, to dad, to grandparents, to educators, doctors,
It's
whomever.
an appointed position. It's
Mhm.
It's an appointed position.
similar to a guardian ad litem, but a little different
Yeah,
because it's volunteer. You're not paid for it.
exactly. Not
Right.
paid.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
but
some
you're
states,
ordered and have
yeah.
access through that order.
Oh, and
Yeah.
you're trained. I left that part
Right.
out, So
Yes.
I overheard the CASA director talking to someone. And when she said, yeah, we're getting ready to start our new training in the spring. And she said, I'm the CASA director. And I immediately started listening. And I said, I'm sorry, would you mind? Like, could I ask you some questions? And that was in the winter. I'm pretty sure it was like January of 2000. And then in April, I began my training. And you spend, it's almost 6 weeks of
Mhm.
very intensive training, learning how to interview, learning how to read various reports, but then also learning how to connect with the individuals, and then going in. And so literally when you get assigned a case, typically what would happen is in CASA, the judge will hear there'll be cases that are arraigned and he will assign them. You get your defects worker that's part of that. And they'll ask for a CASA to be appointed. And then basically the CASA director will come back and look at who's available and if it's a particular area. For me, I wanted to work with toddlers. I wanted to work with the babies and the 2 and 3-year-olds. I still don't know why. I don't know if I could give you a reason, but that was really where I felt drawn in the advocacy work that I did. And the beautiful part, come full circle, is many of the children I worked with, I still have a relationship with today. So I am one of those that I had a hard time just going in and doing the job, giving the report and walking away. I was the one that, kind of made friends for life. They became part of my extended family, so to speak. So
I just want to say real quick, I'm going to put this up here from Fanta, that taking an unpaid position that is so emotionally draining while also a young single mom of 3 boys is absolutely amazing. And I totally agree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
100%.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a lot. And professionally, I had my own decorating business. But I wasn't an interior designer that went in and did all the fancy stuff. I, having grown up in a small town, grew up very, very, I don't want to say poor. I never want to say that because we had food and clothes and running water, but very limited resources. And so I learned at a young age how to take something and not have a lot and really make it beautiful and make it your own space. And so it was cool that after my divorce, I had a lot of self-pity and a lot of, I don't know what I'm going to do. I didn't get my degree. I've got babies. And it wasn't that any of that was bad. It was just like, I didn't know how to get started. I'd been a stay-at-home mom. And so one of my girlfriends, she came over and she said, get up, you're going with me, you're going down. She had a design shop. And she said, you're going with me. I've got a project for you. And she knew that I loved to hang wallpaper and do just different decorating and picking out colors. And she literally laid out the color swatches and she said, I need you to write up a proposal. And I was like, write a what? Like, I had no idea. And so it really and truly, and she's still one of my very best friends to this day here in St. Simons, Brunswick area. And we put together this where there was a niche. I would go in, I would talk to the customers, and I would help them do renovations. And so I was also running many, many projects on the side, had my own general contractor group and subs and stuff, and really built quite the business and loved it, loved volunteering. And that was where 2 worlds collided in 2007 when real estate market crashed, because that was my bread and butter. It was real estate agents that were utilizing me to go in and stage. I was staging before staging was a thing. And even some of the homes, I would go in and live with them, for them to keep. And so imagine having 3 boys and keeping the house decorated and them calling and saying, we need to show the house in 5 hours. So I tell you what, it was really good at helping my boys to keep their chores up each day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was when all of the projects kind of dried up in 2007, because I live in a small area. The real estate market tanks, my projects go away. And I was because of my CASA background, and then my youngest son was 14. He was starting to express some emotional anger. He was a super bright kid. He was super energetic. And that was when it really started to see that there was, he needed some support. He needed some type of help to kind of work through these. And I knew that we had done all we could do. And I was really at that place where you're 14, you're impressionable, you're going through puberty. This is where you can really see a teenager derail. So this was in 2007. So my son is needing a lot of additional support, which can be costly depending on what route you choose.
Right.
Yep. My income went away completely, but I had this passion for advocacy. And literally, again, in some of the darkest moments of your life come the biggest blessings. And so here's my son who's needing this help. And they had an opportunity for me for an admissions director. And the admission director, who is one of my very best friends today, Wendy, she called me, or she didn't call me. I take that back. We were actually at a parent workshop, and she came up to me and she goes, I don't know why, but I just know that you told me in the admission process that you had done CASA and you love decorating. And she goes, I want to know if you would be willing to come help decorate and renovate lives instead of homes. And I was like,
wow, that's awesome.
So cool.
Okay. And so it was really, where one door closes, one door really does open.
Yeah.
Even if it's slightly. And so it was really in 2007, taking these dark moments but also it was another opportunity for me to really start looking in the mirror. There was this deep like pull, that advocate spirit, like what's
Mhm.
going on,
Mhm.
but recognizing too that there was still so much unsettled in me. And typically I could see it just in my emotional responses to things that were
Mhm.
happening. And so I think simultaneously, with my son really coming to terms with himself, and his story ends beautifully. He's in New York now. He works for
Great.
Google. He's doing great. But in those dark moments, it's where not only did he begin to grow, but I think that's where I really began to dig even deeper.
Yeah.
And it was through that journey of taking my past business experience, my advocacy, my real passion for working with abused, neglected, or special needs, because a lot of the cases I work with, the kids would have different diagnoses, and just pulling them all together into one. And started my own advocacy company called the Family Hope Line in 2009. And from there began to work in various capacities in the therapeutic world. So I know I've never worked in residential treatment. I want to go ahead and get this statement out of the way, because I know there's a lot out in the world right now about programs, residential programs, and wilderness programs. Never worked for one. Have always had my own beliefs about that, so I'm not going to state what
Right.
those are. But with the program that just came out, I don't know if anyone's watched it, but it's a Netflix documentary.
Yeah.
And very oddly, that a lot of, not the program in New York, but some of the programs that were mentioned in the third episode or towards the latter part of the second, I had heard or crossed paths with some of
Mm.
those people. So it was
Mhm.
definitely,
Wow.
it's a world that I've been a part of. I want to kind of
Yeah.
just get that out of the way.
Mm.
And watching that, honestly, was shocking to me in many ways. Stories I'd heard, but you don't really know if they're true or not. And
Right.
it really made me question, when I watched the program,
Mm.
I guess it's been a couple months ago, I told my husband, I said, I'm not sure I can do this. Like
Yeah.
listening to this. And then I'm glad I finished it, because at the end, it helped me to go back and look at myself and look at what I do, and say, you know what, I'm not that way. And I don't work with programs that are, and I would never support those. And thank goodness the bad ones are getting taken away.
Yeah.
It's just like if you look in any profession, there's the good and there's the bad. There's some
Right.
that are there for the right reasons, and there's some that are definitely there for the wrong reasons.
Mhm.
They abuse power.
We
They
are going to
don't,
add
there's,
that too.
pardon
When
me.
when we talk about something in particular, we'll circle back to that a little bit, because I have a couple questions about that, but I want
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
yeah.
So again, and I sorry, you guys just have to do this to me, like
No,
come back,
you're
come
good.
back. So I get off on my
You're all good.
my little
Yep.
tangents. So anyway, in 2009, started my own advocacy. Really, that was where I decided, okay, in order to do this, I can connect with various programs, with families, with therapists, and find families that want someone to help them find a program, or that are looking for resources and whatever that might be. I'm going to turn comments off mine, because when that flickers, my
Uh-huh.
own ADHD is triggered. So I'm going to turn that off. And but it was when I was like, how do I pull this together? And so I decided to become a certified parent coach. And so it really kind of allowed me to offer a service while also then supporting other people. So I could work with teens, adolescents or young adults, and then the parents, of course. So I kind of built a parent coaching business alongside my
So
advocacy
cool.
business and helping. And it really, like, it felt like for when I first started. So that was 2009. Then from 2009 to 2014, it really put me in front of a lot of different types of programs, showed me things I didn't want to be a part of. And it allowed me
Mm.
also to really embrace some of the good ones, and really cherish and be so grateful that people were available for that. And then in 2014, I met the owners of the program I'm at now. And we were working with both neurotypical, more failure to launch young adults. So those that probably should have taken a gap year, but didn't know what they wanted. Emotionally, they weren't quite ready or mature enough, to go into college, and really struggled to thrive. But we were also working with neurodiversity. So I have to tell you that everything I know about neurodiversity, I really owe it to the owners. Of course, I've done tons of training, tons of certifications, but I have learned, right out there in the classroom of life,
Yeah.
walking
Yeah.
beside these students and the staff.
I mean, Dawn knows people. Like I just know that you know people. So like whenever I see you talk, not like you know people up in the, like high level
Right.
people. I just mean what you're
Very
looking
well
at.
networked. Yeah.
Yeah. And when
Yeah.
you're looking at a personality, at a behavior, as you just I listen to what you say because you
Yeah.
know what you're
Oh,
looking at.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And that you make a good point. I'm going to sidebar for a second because you make a good point. I've learned it in many areas, but boy, has being on, I still call it Twitter, but on X has just taught me another whole new lesson about people and personalities.
I
And
bet.
I won't get into any of that.
Speaking of Dawn,
Woohoo! It's Jay.
Illuminati. I don't know where that comes from.
Jay and I go way back to Murdaugh days when he was tweeting. And I was so impressed that somebody was brave enough to use the F word on Twitter. I was like, that right there, that's my spirit animal, Jay.
Go, Jay.
Yeah, so early Murdaugh days we go back to. And that's actually how I've met my friend Amanda and Tracy as well, who may or may not be in the chat. I don't have my comments.
Tracy's here and Amanda's here. They
are. Hi, girls. So yeah, and it was interesting. I had just gotten a Twitter account, I guess, in January. And I had actually lived in Bluffton area, which is near Beaufort, which is near Walterboro and near where Moselle was. So I had watched the whole hoopla around Murdaugh, even when the boat accident happened. So I knew about, I had been front and center. The early days. And so, when I moved back to Brunswick, I was only in Bluffton about 2 years. When I moved back to Brunswick, the Murdaugh case was coming out, and then I became more present on Twitter, and because I sat glued to the computer, and so that was when you talk about knowing people. It's very interesting because I realize that people don't always know the person behind the tweet or the picture. I was either dumb enough or brave enough to put my name out there to begin with, and where I live, and I don't know which it is, but my number and name's all over the internet anyway with my work, and I really don't have any secrets. I'll tell you all my secrets. I wouldn't have five years ago.
We don't now. We all looked you up already. Yeah, we know everything.
and that is okay, because you know what? That's part of that story. That's why I'm here today telling what I'm telling. I got over myself a long time ago. So anyway, it has been interesting watching different people and different personalities and their tweets, and then intersecting in real life. So it's an interesting journey that we live on X. But anyway, I'll go off my sidebar tangent about that. But
another show, writing it down.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's do a 6A and 6B segment, maybe.
Oh, Lord.
So I'm joking. So
I'm not.
Where was I in my journey? Let me go back.
I'm so sorry. Murdaugh. We talked about Murdaugh.
Well, before that, the family that I'm with, that I work for now, and the things that I learned. And then we hit 2020. And so a world where you're used to working with people up close and personal in a therapeutic world. It wasn't just I was doing Zoom before anybody was doing Zoom. I thought I had the best kept secret in the world because I worked remotely behind a screen, because I'm not always in Utah. And then 2020 hit, and I was like, but people are complaining. I'm like, this is my world. Like, this is the best job ever to be able to do this and work in my pajamas, and yoga pants became cool. So that was a great thing in 2020. But in 2020, I really came full circle. So to tie all of this up, my story, why I'm doing what I'm doing today, is in 2020, I think because I was at home and because a lot of the outlets that you don't have, you really begin to see yourself up close and personal. And there were a lot of things that were happening in my personal life, things that had accumulated, things that were new. And I really hit at around 50. I spent my 50th birthday in lockdown. So my husband was planning a surprise 50th, and of course that got canceled. So there was this big, it was like the COVID year, 50th birthday. And I just really started to look at my life, and there were some challenges that were thrown our way. And I really kind of reached that point one night of, what is my purpose? Do I even want to be here? And I don't say this for any pity. I mean, this is my story and this is what happened.
Yeah.
But it was like my whole life just came it wasn't like it flashed before me. It was like it wouldn't go away. It came and it sat and it parked in my mind, and it
Mhm.
wouldn't leave. And I really knew that I had to get some professional help. So I really set out on a journey. I had to kind of separate from my husband, and we took some time apart. And I really just kind of went inward, and I looked into so many different. Not looked into. I actually participated in many different trauma healing programs. I did some short-term stuff, never in a residential setting though. I always did one-on-one work. Part of the trauma healing that I have come to appreciate is it's very individualized, and that being in group settings, you can be very triggered by other stuff. So for
Yeah.
me, I knew that I had to isolate, and I just really went within and I started dissecting these points in my life, and it was almost as if I spent a couple of months in each decade, so it took me about 12
Mhm.
months through this journey, but every couple of months, it's like my first 10 years, then 10 to 20, and then,
Yeah.
20 to 30. And I just really started to offer a lot of grace. And that's where the word grace comes from, because
Gotcha.
it was in that moment that I had never given myself grace. I'd grown up Southern Baptist. Don't mean this with any disregard, but I'm a recovering Southern Baptist. I am,
Guilty of everything.
I am a believer, but I just, religion, man-made religion to me, can really be hurtful. And so for me, I'm a believer, but not in a certain denomination. And now I lost my cookie saying that I was a recovering Southern Baptist. See, you got to be careful what you say. You're just like, stop talking. No, I
You're
don't even remember what I was saying, but remind me, Scott, get me back
Yeah,
on
you
track.
you you were talking about how you are recovering Southern Baptist, and then your mainstream religion. You're a believer, but mainstream religion is not necessarily your cup of tea,
Yeah.
and
The
that's
work that
that's
you
where
were
you left
doing.
it, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Grace, that's where I started. So I finally got
Yes.
back to that. So it was where I really began to explore, what is grace? What does that look like? And so Dan, my husband, and I were having early on in our relationship, we've been together almost 10 years, and we really were talking about grace. We had some pretty deep conversations, and he had his own journey with being hurt with religion. And so we started talking about grace, and I started, I wanted to share. I've been journaling for years. I have buckets of books and notebooks and stuff of just things that I've written. And I really do want to share a story, but if that's the right thing, right? So if one day I'm supposed to write this book, I will. And he just looked at me and he said, unshackled grace. That's really what it's all about. Is it's breaking down the barriers. And grace isn't just about religion. It's not just something we hear about in the Bible.
Right.
Grace is really being able to meet yourself where you are. It's being able to let go of all of the various titles and the various layers of yourself, and just really standing there exposed and saying, this is who I am, being transparent, being vulnerable. And when he said that, we immediately, you got to go get the URL, make sure the domain is available. So Unshackled Grace. And I
Cool.
began writing a book. It really was where the idea of that Unshackled Grace began to just, I think, started tearing down the walls. And then it was in 2020 that I went through the various forms of healing. And it was honestly one of those times too, that 2020, again, a dark moment, was a real blessing for me, because had that not happened, it might
Yeah.
be a very different story for me today. So yeah, so that's really how bring it all back full circle. We can then
Mhm.
dive into any of these questions you guys
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
That's where advocacy and grace comes from. So
That's cool.
yeah.
That's
That's
very
awesome. Thank you.
that's a
Thank you for
great story.
sharing.
One thing that when you were talking, Dawn, that really stands out to me, and I think that people forget this, and I'm just going to bring it up real quick. I think that all of us go through struggles in life, and the thing that I think is so important is that people treat people with respect and kindness, because nobody knows what that person is going through. You can't see it on the outside,
Right.
and they may be going through a horrible time in their life, and trying to find themselves. And so, yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, that's so true. And when you're that person that wears the mask, right? When you're that
Mhm.
person that shows up and you have the persona of what you think everybody else wants you to be, when really you're not that important to everybody else. They're just trying to survive themselves, but you don't
Sure.
realize that, right?
Yeah.
And so, I was able to learn about myself, codependency and what that looks like and how that comes out, and trauma and how trauma impacts who we are. And it was so cool to finally, it's only been in the last, I would say, a year and a half, maybe even a year, that I've kind of stepped fullness into it. And like, I am Southern, I used to, try to mask the very Southern twang. It depends on if I'm
Well,
nervous or
Dawn, I don't know why you would do that.
I
Listen,
told you she'd do it, Dawn. I
I'm
told
gonna
you.
take my opportunity.
It happened. It happened. And I can always judge when I travel when someone says, "Are you from Texas? Are you from Alabama?" And I'm like, because there are dialects in those southern areas. But yeah, I just finally kind of said, I am. I was a single mom, and I didn't get my degree, and I didn't do this path that was the tried and true. But I really took a look at myself, and I don't know that there was anything I would change. I mean, certainly if it involves my kids, there's probably a lot of things, but that's a different thing. But
Yeah.
when I really look at the way it has unfolded and I look at where I'm at today, I mean, I think each day I'm living in what grace really looks like,
Mm-hmm.
that some fool like me who's made so many mistakes, but yet had that heart, that burning passion to help others and do better and be the best version of myself. It's kind of cool to stand in that place today. So
that's
very
awesome.
good.
So you have a very unique perspective then on some of the true crime cases that we look at, right? So I wanted to ask you about, and if you're comfortable talking about this, you had posted something yesterday that you shared with me. I think you ended up posting it. You shared the screenshot with me, and I think, oh no. She was like, nope, not talking about that.
That's funny.
All right, hold on.
Just give us a second. We'll get her back, guys.
Get her back. Again, not me. I'm here. Intermission. Oh, okay. Hold on a second. Here she comes. Okay.
Take 3. It did it again. I looked
Yeah.
When you saw me looking, I was like, what's going on over there? And there was a spinning and it was gone again. So
that's okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
That's okay.
So I think you posted what the screenshot that you sent to me before, and you were talking about with regard to Sebastian Rogers, who is the 15-year-old autistic child missing out of Tennessee. And someone had put out there that maybe he was taken to a program of some sort. And you had some things to say about that. So tell me what if you're comfortable kind of telling us how you responded to that.
Yeah. Just whatever you feel like you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was and I don't even mind saying, people can go and look up where it was. It was someone had commented on a Nancy Grace. And they had mentioned, after seeing this picture, which I would love to believe that is Sebastian. Would love to believe there's so many similarities. In my heart of heart, in my gut, it says no, but that doesn't matter. I mean, I don't want anyone to lose hope, and we all want to believe there's going to be a happy ending, and we keep the faith, right? But I've got my own reasons for that as well. I truly believe that if it had been, and with all that's in the publicity, things would have happened immediately instead of later. And I pray that this isn't someone that's just trying to get known in the arena. And I hate to be that way, but we do see that. And I think we have to, that's that logical side that Chris, that you and I were talking about yesterday. We have the side that we look at through our emotions, and then we have to go back to logic and what makes the most sense in certain situations. However, it's not saying it's impossible, but this person had posted to Nancy Grace, is it possible, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it pulled in front of me, but from my memory, what I believe it said was, is it possible he's in one of those boot camps, wilderness boot camps, where parents can hire people to come in and kidnap their kids in the middle of the night without parents being home and take them? And I was like, oh my gosh, like instantly, again, I'm back to reliving in my mind this documentary that's been out.
Right.
Wilderness programs, I think that there are some recreational wilderness programs that they're short term, that do amazing work from like a therapeutic workshop. But I don't believe in behavior modification. I believe you heal the root cause of people. And so in a lot of these boot camp settings, whether it be wilderness or an RTC, therapeutic boarding, some of those modalities are more working on conforming the behaviors of someone versus better understanding the root of the behaviors of someone. And so when she brought that up, I immediately started thinking like, okay, first and foremost, let's go logical. He's 15 and his parents are divorced. If he is in a program and he's tucked away, one or both parents are being dishonest.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because,
Right.
guys, it's not as simple as, hey, my teen's acting up. Can you come and pick them up? There are so many legal forms, and there are releases. There are medical releases that need to take place for a kid to go to a wilderness. And I've never worked in it. So, but from what I understand in our industry and industry standards through all of the associations that I'm part of, they have to go through medical clearance. You can't just, I know in the news recently, there was the kid from New York that possibly did not go through the medical clearance.
Yeah.
So when I say this, what I'm saying is how programs are supposed to be. I'm not saying that's what
Right.
you're practicing at all.
Right. And so if a program came in and did this, they're clearly not operating under industry standard. So who knows what
None.
forms they even have
Absolutely.
them out at all,
And
right?
it's criminal, right? Because
Yes.
because if a program has him, that is criminal. That's kidnapping, because the parents the parents had to have signed an authorization for the kid to even be there. And this is what's, when you look at it,
could just one parent sign though without the other? So this is a thing, because it depending on your state. I know here, when working in custody issues, where the state I'm in is a one parent consent state. And so you could take your kid to the doctor, sign for treatment, and it's fine. They don't have, if you're divorced, you need shared custody, you don't have to have the other parent sign. Just one person signs. But some states are both parents have to sign.
Right.
In the divorce situation. So
Yeah.
that would,
Yeah.
I don't know what Tennessee is.
I
but
didn't look up to see if Tennessee, and if where the sighting was, it would be North Carolina. So you're talking about across state lines.
Well, then
So
that's a
now
whole
we've
other
got
issue.
now we've got what is the International PAC Agreement? You've got all these forms, I-9s, and all of these that come into play. And I did
Mhm.
admission paperwork. So when I tell you it's a book of paperwork and authorizations, and I worked in adolescent to begin with. Again, not wilderness. It was a therapeutic boarding school. But there's a lot of paperwork involved. And so it would just a logic that could he be there? I immediately was like, yes, but there's crime after crime after crime that's now been committed in order for that to happen. Would it be awesome? Yes. But I think the thing that was the most alarming to me, because I did work for several years in assisting in some teen interventions, only with females, never worked with males, but there would be moms that I would be working with, and they're like, there's no way I can get my daughter on the plane. And we did it with a lot of compassion and a lot of preparation. And we would come in, and the parents are involved briefly. They do wake them up. And then myself and my partner would then walk in and sit and talk to them. Now, were the kids happy to see a strange, small Southern woman sitting there? When I say small, I mean height, not size. Sitting there and talking to them at 3 a.m.? No. But the reason that you come in just to speak to that middle of the night piece is that when defenses are the lowest. That's when you're operating within that short window of fight or flight kicking in. And
Right.
and so it is that shock factor. I can't speak for every intervention, and I do want to call it an intervention transport service. I can't speak for every one of them. I can only speak from the work that I did, which was maybe a few times over a 3 or 4 year period. So yes, coming in, but parents are present. Otherwise, it would be considered kidnapping if parents left the
Right.
home and left their teenager for. I mean, and anything could happen. So there's just a lot of sometimes in those statements that I really wanted. It wasn't that I was like shocked she was asking this. It was just another opportunity to I really want to share with you. And I even said, I'm happy to DM me if you want. I'd love to share more, because it's not that I want to argue or defend or anything like that. But I just think we have to operate from a place of real facts and information.
Right.
And when it
Like you
comes
said, logic.
Yeah.
So
logic.
one of the other things we had talked about yesterday, you and I, and with Scott, was the idea, and you guys, I don't want to get canceled over this conversation. So we're really trying to not be canceled over this. But again, let's look at some things logically here, and what we know about autism, right? And the various levels of functioning. So there were a couple things that stood out to me, that the parents say that he's high functioning. Now, I don't know if that's something professionals have said to them and that's what they're repeating, or if they believe he's high functioning because of their own frame of reference of what high functioning means. Some people will say people who with autism who are high functioning, it's things like they can take their own shower and brush their own teeth, and they're verbal, and they go to school, and they do basically, but there's just that maybe social piece of it
Right.
that's not functioning very well. Other people might say, other people might say high functioning is like they go to school and they don't have to be institutionalized, and it just, I don't know what their definition of that is. I will say, from what we have heard about, it's time to Jason, sorry, just got back from Twitter tweeting it's time to cancel Dawn. Well, cancel us before you cancel Dawn, poor thing.
Who said that?
Jay. Okay, so I'm not ready to drop the F-bomb here either, but maybe we'll get to that point. So the what was I gonna say? Oh, so we're talking about a kid who all the parents have said there are some behavioral problems. We don't really know what those were. I mean, they could be from severe to not that big of a deal. Who knows? But one of the things the dad mentioned, Seth mentioned, was that he was about to start ABA therapy, which is applied behavioral analysis. And that any age person with autism can do that therapy. It looks very different when you're older than younger, but typically it's for much younger, not teenagers, not adolescents, much younger kids with autism, and targeting specific behaviors like headbanging or hitting other people, or at an age that it's not developmentally appropriate anymore, those kinds of things. To me, that's an indicator that he's really not as high functioning as they're saying he is. Okay, so with all that being said, and I don't really know, this is all, I hate that we have to say, in my opinion. It's obviously in my opinion. Is this speculation? Yes. I hate that I have to say that, but I will. Okay. So let's just, if we just look at this, if he were to wander, so when parents say that their autistic teenager wanders, that doesn't mean they have a plan for where they're going to go. That doesn't necessarily even mean there's a reason why they're leaving. It's like wandering around. It wouldn't be like I'm wandering around and hiding. It would be I'm walking down the street, and then, oh, now I'm going to walk down this street, and then someone would see him.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
If he left because he wanted to get the heck out of there, I find it very hard to logically justify him being stealth enough to avoid all cameras, to have a plan. So we talked about like that frontal lobe dysfunction of like planning, organizing, problem solving. I have a very difficult time believing, from what I know about him, that he would have a plan that was that meticulously executed in the long term. So like he knew what was going to happen when he got to the end of the street, and then beyond that, and then beyond that, and then beyond that. I just don't think that's logical. He would have needed food. He would have needed his medicine. He would have needed shelter. First time it rained, he would have been like, oh my gosh, it's just,
it doesn't make sense.
It does not make sense that he
not at all.
left that house on his own and has not been found.
Nope.
And what I have found, speaking across the board, in most what we call high functioning level 1, there's various various levels of this, of course, but that you described the level 1 really well. It's typically there's skewed social skills. Executive functioning is very delayed. So, when you're teaching some of these, even some of this behavioral that you're talking about, there's also the ADA, the adaptive living skills that, not ADA, but yeah, probably got the wrong initials. But anyway,
ADL.
ADL.
That's activities of daily living.
Thank you for correcting me, because that's all the
like
running together.
Getting dressed, brushing your teeth, cleaning up after yourself. It's all those basic things we do without even thinking about it.
And that comes from repetition. And there again is where, when you go back to a neurotypical versus a neurodiverse person, they're able to kind of follow the progression of those ADLs. Things become second nature. With the neurodivergent brain, things don't come as second nature. You don't, you thrive on consistency, but it's the consistency someone else is providing for that individual. It's not their own ability to provide that consistency. Their brain is spinning, because typically you see an ADD or ADHD. So their mind is firing on all cylinders, but they're incapable of really focusing and formulating a plan. I find it, honestly, from the first day, red flags went off. I'm just going to be really honest with you.
There's
I'm
a
not going to
whole
make
lot more to this.
accusations.
Yeah.
Same here.
And I held hope for about 24 hours. And am I saying that a 15-year-old autistic kid can't run away? They absolutely can.
Right.
100%.
Could have hid somewhere. It wouldn't have been that complex of a place where no one could find him.
Absolutely. But let's look at the fact that it was done in the middle of the night. Most people with autism have sensory issues. It's too hot, too cold, it's too loud. It's not, there's little noises that maybe those without autism can't hear, but they can't hear you talking directly to them, but they can hear a hum in the other room. And it's really like on a different octave in their head. So they're very stimulated. And then, so let's logic this. Middle of the night, between 9 p.m. dark, 6 a.m., still dark, freezing cold. He bolts out of a door with no shoes, no meds, no clothes, no food. Where was he going to go? What was he going to do? He didn't take his phone. There were so that was day one, thoughts. I also think that for kids that run away, they typically are going to go from somewhere. So like at school, just not come home after school, or see a friend, or walk to school and not show up at school. Right. But that middle of the night was very concerning. I was like, I just don't see how.
The sheer planning of it.
Yeah.
And to not be scared. I mean, a normal 15-year-old isn't even going to be that good at planning it unless they have a friend who can drive, or you know what I mean? Like, it drives me crazy. I'm sorry, but I'm sorry to all the other professionals out there, but drives me nuts hearing people hang on to the idea that maybe he ran away.
Yeah.
Well, and let's consider what Seth said too regarding, his leaving without shoes. Seth, in the very beginning, if you guys remember in the investigation, Seth was very forthcoming that he would not leave without shoes. He has had issues with fire ants. He is scared to death to go outside without shoes. That did not happen.
Exactly.
So, I mean, so with an autistic person, Dawn, and that fear, can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, would they deviate from that, in your opinion, from that fear?
I think because of the level of anxiety that someone with autism has just naturally, like just waking up and getting themselves dressed and going into classroom can overstimulate them. So to consider that in the middle of the night, a kid, wouldn't have been anxious, like, oh, I'm just going to walk out the door and I'm going to disappear and I'm going to vanish into thin air.
Right.
That just doesn't even, because just the anxiety alone that they would have faced. Also the fear of being in trouble,
Sure.
What I have seen with most of the young adults that I work with is that they're terrified of authority. They're terrified of doing something wrong. Many of them have been bullied. They've been chastised. They've been told to be different than who you are. And a lot of well-meaning professionals and parents, it's not meaning that was what was intended to happen, but sometimes that's what they hear, or that's what they feel based on how things were presented to them. So what I find is there's an underlying fear within most of the young adults that I work with. They fear being accepted. They fear being rejected. Many of the young adults I work with have tons of trauma. Some of them are adopted. Some of them come from horrible backgrounds. They've been adopted by fabulous parents, but it doesn't mean that their formative years weren't horrible. And so just some of those things, but even they wouldn't run away from home. They'll threaten it. I'm going to run away, or I'm not ever coming back here. But when it really gets down to it, they don't leave the comfort of their own bedroom where their game system is and their shoes are and those types of things.
What was it? Seth said that he's more like how old emotionally? I can't remember what he said.
I think he said 9.
9. Okay. 10, so here's an example. When I was 8, I told my parents I was running away. Literally, I don't think there was any reaction whatsoever. But I packed in a bag, I packed a loaf of bread, because that's what you do when you run away. And I don't even know what else, maybe a stuffed animal. I ran away to the garage. I sat out there for about 10 minutes and I was like, like, why isn't anybody looking for me? Why, like, this is boring. I don't want to do this. So I went back inside.
Right.
He's like, and everyone was like, what are you doing? I mean, nobody really, I was like, nobody cares about me. You didn't even know I was gone. It's like, so that's an 8 or 9-year-old mentality.
Mind,
And if
yes.
that's what you're talking about, the planning and the execution, the motive, all of that, it's like, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is here, but it's like, why is it taking so long?
Yeah. And with
It's
autism, they naturally isolate, and that isolation is a form of protection because they do get overstimulated. They do have the sensory. I'm sorry, but even though their bedrooms are messy, and when I walk in some of these young adult bedrooms, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's like a bomb went off and we just did room checks. The smell.
Welcome to my home.
But that is, it's been mine before, trust me. But that is that's their safety zone. Like that is their space that they, hold on, something just popped up. I want to make sure it's not that. Okay, no, I don't know what that is, but at least it's not spinning. I wanted to make sure I didn't disappear. But they don't leave the comfort of that, regardless of what's going on. Let's think about the timing of this. He just had the perfect weekend with his mom.
Right.
He just done all of these fun things. Stepdad hadn't been there in over a month. Now I'm stating things as I've heard them. I'm not saying these are really good point. The case.
No, that's a great
point. There's not anything that has been shared with the public that I have come across. Please, anybody share it. That happened that would cause him to want to
imminent threat.
Right.
There was no imminent threat. No imminent threat. I know people have said, oh, he didn't want to go to his dad's because he didn't want to homeschool. Here's another thing. One of the parents may not have wanted him to homeschool. He may have said, oh, I'll miss my teachers. I'll miss my friends. That doesn't mean he didn't want to homeschool. And I don't think that there would have been this thought process of, if I run away, that'll prevent me from going to dad's. And so there's
that's planning, organized. That's a connection that would not be made. And also it's being framed that he did not want to go to dad's. No, he didn't want to do the homeschooling. It wasn't that he didn't want to go to dad's. Those just two things just happened to have been happening simultaneously. But
Adrian just brought up a really good point, made a really good comment. Adrian Ferguson, she's joining us, you guys, from Scotland.
Yeah.
And
I don't have that accent.
We have two people from across the pond. Sean's here somewhere, I think. I think he's still here.
Yeah.
Anyway, Adrian said, I was about to say this. My little cousin has autism and his home is the safe place. He would never dream of leaving his home. He would be terrified. And Saltwater Soul also made a similar comment to what you were saying, Dawn, that they like routine. And they would be terrified if they had to just run off and leave their home.
Yeah. And BZ Mama that's on here, I have to say she and I've connected, and she's down, I think, closer towards the end. She and I've connected. We've had a lot of private conversations, and she actually is the mother of a child with autism. This is her life. Like, we have shared some of this just really, she's just been so vulnerable with me, and I've really appreciated that. And also sometimes she's so authentic in some of her posts, and I love that because I wish I was that comfortable sometimes to be so real. And so I just have huge respect for her. And she just said, my ASD kiddo doesn't like to deviate from what he knows. And that really is the situation. Some of the emotional outbursts that you see is their inability to articulate, I'm in distress, I'm angry, I don't like this. And so a lot of the stimming that you'll see, or the, like you said earlier, the banging of the head or the repetition, those are when they get what I call an ASD loop. They get loopy brain. Like they just get caught in that thought process, and they can't really break from it. So I just think about, the fear of the unknown. Where am I going? I don't have any resources, but I'm leaving my safe place. I don't see how that would even be.
Doesn't make sense, does it? No,
it doesn't.
Because the change in routine, is a trigger for that emotional reaction. And so they're not going to be kids that invite change and invite disruptions to their routines, So this idea of wandering, quite honestly, look, I'm a psychologist. I don't know everything about mental health, but I've really only wandering as a more typical symptom is for people with schizophrenia. I've actually not heard that wandering is a super common thing with kids with autism.
Right.
I don't
It's not
know.
been my experience.
Yeah.
Avoidant behaviors, yes. So if that means I'm
Yes.
going to go out and take a walk, or I'm feeling overstimulated, I need to change.
That's
But
different to
typically,
me.
that takes someone working. It's not the wandering.
Yep.
One of the things that stood out to me too, when Katie was mentioning that, he could walk to the place and get ice cream by himself. For that, I'd want to know more history. I mean, I think great, that's awesome. But the fact that she even made that a big deal, most 15-year-olds leave their house and go get ice cream. That's not something that they have to work on. It's just that rite of passage. As you become more responsible, you get more privileges. And so the fact that that was pointed out told me also that she had been dealing with a child that was very developmentally delayed from an emotional
Yes.
standpoint. And she made there was a huge focus on that detail. And that was another thing. There were a couple things that they said in that first interview and their second interview. I think the first one was audio, second one was visual. And because of the work I do, those were the red flags. There's little statements about certain areas that, like you said, for someone that doesn't understand autism, that's not going to register. It's like, oh, this is just information. So,
yeah.
So I definitely, the wandering is not something that I see, flooded and I'm going to bolt because I'm upset or I'm angry or I'm going to kind of have an emotional eruption right here and there, but not the wandering.
And bolt and keep going. No, you know what I mean? Like maybe run to them the street mad and then, you run after him and they're fine. But yeah, I mean, if he knew someone was there waiting for him, same thing. I really just don't think he would have left out of his bedroom window. That just the disruption in the change in routine, the disruption in the middle of the night. Like he had his bedtime routine. He was playing before he went to bed. He would have gotten in bed, gone to sleep. I just don't think that unless it was someone he knew.
Right.
Now, I mean, sure, if his grandparent or his dad or somebody came up to the window and said, "Come on, it's okay. Come through the window." Then yeah, he might.
Right.
I mean, but we have I don't know. I mean,
I think again, we're back to, could he have done that? Yes. But there would have been a disturbance on the ground. There would have been things that
they didn't
we would have already heard about.
Right.
There would have been something, and so can those things happen? Yes. I also think that when we look at and explore some of those as the options, we got to look at the time frame of how long he's been missing.
Yeah.
We're not talking 2 days, 3 days, 2 weeks now. We're now into the months.
Yeah.
And so, and so that leads us all back to the picture that has emerged, and could he be tucked away somewhere? He could, but we will have a criminal case if that turns out to be, because there's a lot of laws been broken on behalf of that child, and it could compromise both parents if there's any deceit in the way that was done. So I would hate to see something, and I'm speaking not from a judgmental standpoint of the parents, and I'm not making accusations. So I want to be really clear. I'm making no accusations, but I'm saying just from my realm of work, those would be the ramifications if something like that does pan out to be the case.
Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah. So it's definitely going to be interesting how all of this turns out.
Yeah. I mean, if that's him in the picture and Seth knows who that woman is in the picture, I imagine we would hear something within the next week, but you never know. So listen, I could get us canceled real quick if I went on and on about what I actually thought.
I have some very strong feelings too.
I have to tell you, I've got some strong feelings, and I also, I want to say this, and I'm going to try to be really careful in saying this, but I want to stop. I'm not going to say I want us all to. What I myself have had to stop and really think about is a 15-year-old with the emotional, maybe the emotional cognition of a 9 to 10 to 11-year-old, depending on the circumstances. However, he's going through puberty.
Right.
Body exploration is occurring. This is typically where through the game systems, regardless of how many buffers and controls and all that we think are on those, and regardless of what platform it is, they are hearing things, they are learning things, they are being exposed to things. And if people think that just playing a game and doing live chat is a safe place, it is not always a safe place. There can be a lot of dangerous things that occur and are taught. So I've even explored in my mind, you think about the thud, you think about the various details that were told, you think about the timing of things, could this be mom walked in and he was potentially on a game system or something, or he was doing something, and and she became alarmed, and there was an accident or something like that. I have all those things. And again, I'm
Sure.
not making accusations. I'm trying to go from a place of logic and really looking at a situation. But again, only putting it through the filter of what could. Scott, what you said yesterday, and like I've written that down, but is that usually the motive or what happened is the simplest answer. It's not the
So
most
usually
complex.
very simple. I think I didn't mean to cut you off, Dawn, but
No, go ahead,
yeah,
please.
you're right. I mean, in all of my years as a detective and then later as a forensic interviewer, you look at motive a lot on how things happen, and I think sometimes people tend to overthink it, and they start to, well, what if this, what if that, and that's fine because that's what law enforcement does. When we sit down at a missing person case or at a murder scene or whatever, we throw all kinds of theories out there, and that's how things
Mm-hmm.
get solved. But oftentimes it's very, very simple,
Yeah,
the motive, and, this and that equals this, and that's how we're going to, that's our motive,
right.
And so I have to be very careful what I say too. I have very, very strong opinions on this and have from day one, right off the get go.
So little
So
teaser, Scott and I are going to be doing a show next week with just me and him, and we're going to be a little opinionated. I think we'll see how far we get, but I'm going to talk a little bit about attachment theory and some of the behaviors that we would see in a parent with a healthy attachment to their child, and some of the behaviors we may see when they do not. And y'all can apply that as you will.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I will be sitting
Teaser.
in the chat for sure and asking you questions, because
Yay.
actually attachment theory is one of the, I haven't talked a whole lot about the company that I work for. So maybe, I know we're over time from what we had talked about, but maybe just as a wrap up, I'll
Okay.
just circle back and share a little bit about new perspectives and and what I do there. But the attachment theory and the attachment piece is a huge part of the work that we do with young adults, because with the young adults I work with, because with autism, relationships and attachment, and then you add, it is a big thing because there's social connection. So it doesn't mean, a lot of people say they lack empathy. I believe, in my experience, they lack the ability to display their empathy. I think the empathy is in there. I think the empathy comes out in other behaviors because they don't know how to properly express that. Just like reciprocity, they want to talk to someone, but they don't know how to have that dialogue. And so those are some of the things that we're working on. But attachment theory, also polyvagal theory, people can look that up. There's fabulous information. But it really is just, do we exist in our fight or flight? Or are we really living in the present moment and allowing ourselves to feel and respond at that time? So it's like, where are we, and the polyvagal is a little small, right behind the ear. So I'm not a doctor, but I've learned all of these fabulous things, and I could go on and on. So I can't wait to hear you talk more about that next week.
Well, we're going to do the show. We're looking at probably next Friday. We need to go back to Friday due to some scheduling stuff. So we haven't figured out a time yet, but Rachel and I will talk about that. And so it'll be Friday, the whatever day in May that is.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever day in May
May
that is
11th,
next Friday.
May 10th?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hold on.
Not this Friday, next. That's
not
how I
this
go.
Friday.
That's how I do. Yes,
May
the
10th.
10th.
So
Perfect.
there may be a brief lapse in our show until next Friday, but we'll be back for sure.
So please like this video, please subscribe to us, tell your friends. This is awesome, Dawn. Thank you so much.
You,
we had an awesome turnout today, and I'm sure so many are going to want to see this replay. This is really fun.
I've so loved being able to connect on another platform other than X with some of these people. And I wish I knew everyone's real name, because some I only know by their screen name. So that's kind of, but anyway, it was great having everyone here and being able to share.
Absolutely.
I think my nerves finally settled down, so I was able to be more present. And there's little Fern. Fern was a really good girl.
She's a good girl.
She's like half
our new mascot.
Yes, this is our new mascot, everyone. If you missed her in the beginning, she's been in my lap sleeping.
And you know what I'll do is, now that I've had this, I'll just do a follow-up on my Twitter, and I will, or my X, I'm not being appropriate here, of the program I work for, and just give a little bit of information and a link. And It's just,
Awesome.
it's a
Thank
real
you.
life setting for young adults that are neurodiverse. Autism is probably one of the larger populations of diagnosis that we work with, but
Mhm.
certainly anything that falls under the autism spectrum disorder. And we're really allowing them to live in real life settings, to be immersed in the community while also having a lot of support. So a lot of life coaching, therapeutic interventions as well. So they do have therapy. Um, but really giving them a safe place to attempt life and have a lot of support. And then we pull back the supports.
That's awesome.
All of our students want to be there. Well, I say they want to be there, they've agreed to be there. There's
Mhm.
times when the discomfort steps up and more responsibility, and they struggle
They're
with
like,
that.
no.
But yeah, so it's that push pull for sure. But they it's so beautiful watching their journey and then how they evolve. And
Awesome.
I've got several students getting ready to graduate, so my heart's being tugged on right now because they'll be transitioning on
Aw,
to
Uh-huh.
their next phase soon. So, but yeah,
Very
love what I
cool.
do. Yeah.
Awesome.
awesome.
We appreciate
Cool.
you being here, and
Thank
all of our
you. Thank you,
viewers.
everyone.
Thank you to all the viewers, and we have some new ones this week, so thank you for
Yeah, thank
that,
you.
and hope to see you guys again.
All right.
Yes.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.